What if I told you, this moment right now isn't real? Not fake in the obvious way. Not like a dream you wake up from, but something deeper. Something constructed. Think about it. You're looking at a screen, hearing my voice, processing words. But how do you know any of it exists beyond your perception? You don't. And that's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because the idea that we might be living in a simulation isn't just science fiction anymore. It's a real theory, taken seriously by some of the smartest people alive. At first, it sounds ridiculous. We assume reality is, well, real, solid, physical, reliable. You wake up, gravity works, time moves forward, everything feels consistent. But then, cracks start to appear. Tiny ones at first, like how the universe seems to run on mathematical rules. Perfect ones. Why math? Why does reality behave like code? Physics doesn't describe why things exist. It describes how they behave. Like rules. Like a system. Almost like a program. And here's where it gets weird. Scientists discovered that at the smallest possible scale, reality breaks. Not metaphorically. Literally. Space and time stop being smooth. They become pixelated, discrete, like tiny building blocks, like resolution limits, as if reality can only render so much detail. Sound familiar? Now think about this. In video games, developers don't render everything at once. That would be impossible. They only render what the player sees. Everything else, it doesn't exist until you look at it. So here's the question. Why does the universe behave the same way? There's something called the observer effect. Particles don't have a fixed state until they're observed. Before that, they exist in multiple possibilities at once. Only when you look does reality choose. Why? Why would observation change reality? Unless reality isn't fully loaded until it's needed. Unless it's being rendered. Now, let's go deeper. There's a famous thought experiment. Imagine a computer simulation so advanced, it can simulate an entire universe. Every atom, every brain, every thought. Inside that simulation, there are conscious beings. They feel real. They are real to themselves. Now imagine those beings create their own simulations. And those simulations create more, and more, and more. Eventually, simulated realities outnumber base reality by billions. So, statistically, it becomes far more likely that you're inside one than the original. Let that sink in. If even one civilization anywhere ever reaches that level of technology, then the odds that you're in base reality drop to almost zero. That's not science fiction. That's probability. Now here's where things start to get unsettling. Because some physicists believe we may already be seeing the limits of this system. For example, there's a maximum speed in the universe. The speed of light. Nothing can go faster. Why is there a speed limit? Why would reality have bandwidth constraints? And then there's the Planck length. The smallest measurable unit of space. You can't go smaller. It's like reality has a minimum resolution. Like pixels. And time also comes in tiny units. Like frames per second. What if time isn't flowing, but updating? Frame by frame. Moment by moment. Now, let's pause for a second. Because I know what you're thinking. This is just theory. There's no proof. And you're right. There's no smoking gun. No giant, simulation-confirmed message in the sky. But there are oddities. Glitches, if you will. People report strange experiences. Moments where reality feels off. Like déjà vu. You've been here before. You know what's about to happen. But you can't explain how. Or those moments when time seems to slow down. Or speed up. Or skip entirely. Ever lost time? Minutes, gone? No memory? Now, sure. There are psychological explanations. Your brain misfires. Memory overlaps. Perception distorts. Simple. Comforting. But what if that's not the whole story? What if those are rendering errors? Tiny cracks in the system. Now here's something that might make you laugh. In some video games, NPCs, non-player characters, only exist to fill the world. They have routines, patterns. They repeat. They don't question reality. They just exist. So here's a weird thought. How many people have you met who feel like that? Predictable. Scripted. Like they're following a loop. Wake up. Work. Sleep. Repeat. No deviation. No awareness. Now relax. I'm not saying people aren't real, but it raises a question. In a simulated world, would everyone need to be fully conscious? Or just the ones being observed? Now let's talk about something even stranger. There are researchers exploring the idea that our universe might be compressible, that the information content of reality might be encoded like data. Some studies suggest the universe behaves like a hologram, a projection, 3 dimensions, emerging from 2, like depth, created artificially. And if that's true, then what we perceive as space might not even exist the way we think it does. It could be an interface. Now here's where things escalate. Because if we're in a simulation, then someone or something is running it. Who? Why? Are we an experiment, entertainment, a training program, or something else entirely? And here's the part that gets uncomfortable. If this is a simulation, then everything you've ever known, your memories, your relationships, your identity, could be data, constructed. But it feels real, right? Pain feels real. Love feels real. Fear feels real. So does it matter? If something feels real, isn't that enough? Now, skeptics push back hard on this idea. They argue it's unfalsifiable. You can't prove we're in a simulation, but you also can't prove we're not. And that's the problem. It sits right on the edge of science and philosophy. Some say it's just a modern version of an old question. What is reality? Others say it's a distraction, a way to avoid deeper truths. But then, something strange happens, because the more we advance technology, the closer we get to creating our own simulations. Virtual reality is getting better. AI is getting smarter. Worlds are becoming more immersive, more believable, more real. So ask yourself this. If we're already building simulated worlds, what makes you think someone else didn't get there first? Now here's the twist. What if the goal of the simulation isn't to trap us, but to hide something? What if base reality is something we're not supposed to see? Or worse, what if this simulation is a filter, a controlled environment, keeping us from asking the right questions? Because think about it. If you discovered, beyond any doubt, that none of this was real, what would you do? Would society collapse? Would meaning disappear? Or would people wake up? Maybe that's why there's no clear evidence. Because the system doesn't want you to know. Or maybe it's waiting for you to figure it out. And here's the part that keeps people up at night. If this is a simulation, then it can be modified, changed, paused, or ended at any moment. No warning, no explanation, just gone. So now I'll ask you something, not as a theory, not as a joke, but as a real question. If tomorrow you found undeniable proof that this reality isn't real, would you want to leave, or would you choose to stay? Because maybe, just maybe, the scariest part isn't that we're in a simulation. It's that we might never know what's outside it, or if there even is an outside at all. So tell me in the comments, do you think this is base reality, or are we already inside something much bigger? And if we are, Do you think whoever's running it is watching us right now? If you want more videos that make you question everything you thought was real, hit subscribe. Because next time, we go even deeper. Because there's one more layer to this. And it might be the most disturbing one yet. Let's say, for a moment, this really is a simulation. Not a metaphor. Not a thought experiment. An actual system. Then there's something we haven't talked about. Limits. Every simulation ever created, no matter how advanced, has constraints. Processing power. Memory. Energy. Even the most powerful computers can't simulate everything at once. So they cheat. They optimize. They cut corners. They fake details the user will never notice. Now ask yourself this. What if our universe does the same thing? There's a concept in physics called quantum indeterminacy. At a fundamental level, things don't exist in a fixed state until they're measured. It's not just that we don't know their state. It's that they don't have one until observation forces it. That's not just strange. That's efficient. Why calculate every detail in advance when you can wait until it's needed? Why render the entire universe when you can just render the part being observed? It's exactly how simulations work. And here's where it gets eerie. Some physicists have suggested that if reality is a simulation, we might eventually detect the underlying code. Not lines of programming, but patterns, limits, artifacts, just like pixels on a screen, just like compression in a video. And some believe we may have already seen hints of this. For example, cosmic rays, high-energy particles from space, have an upper limit to how much energy they can carry. Almost like they're hitting a ceiling. Like there's a maximum setting that can't be exceeded. Why would nature impose a cap like that? Unless it can't go higher. Now think about randomness. True randomness is incredibly hard to produce. Even computers struggle with it. They use algorithms, pseudo-random systems, that only appear random. But underneath, there's always a pattern. So here's the question. Is the universe truly random, or just convincing? Because if we ever found a pattern in randomness, a predictable structure beneath the chaos, that would be huge. That would suggest there's something behind the curtain. Now let's talk about consciousness, because this is where things get really uncomfortable. In a simulation, what are you? Are you the player, or the character? Are you controlling the body you're in, or are you the body? Think about your thoughts. Where do they come from? Did you choose your last thought, or did it just appear? Now imagine this. What if your consciousness isn't generated inside your brain? What if it's connected to something else? Like a signal, like a user, logged into a system. That would mean your body is just an avatar, a vessel. And when it dies, you don't. You log out. Or maybe, you respawn. Sounds crazy, right? But think about how naturally we're moving toward that reality ourselves. We're already building digital identities, avatars, virtual worlds where people live entire lives, work, socialize, fall in love, inside simulations. So again, what makes you think this isn't just a more advanced version of that? Now here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. If this is a simulation, then there could be glitches. Not obvious ones. Not like walls disappearing or people freezing mid-sentence. Subtle ones. Tiny inconsistencies. Moments where reality doesn't quite line up. People have reported seeing things that shouldn't exist. Objects appearing, then vanishing. Places that feel wrong. Like they don't belong. Stories of time slips, where someone enters a location and suddenly feels like they've stepped into another era. Different sounds, different people. Then, just like that, it's gone. Now, of course, there are explanations for all of this. Memory errors, stress, environmental factors. The brain is incredibly powerful and incredibly easy to fool. But here's the problem. Not all of these stories are easy to dismiss. Some are detailed, consistent, shared by multiple people who have never met, and they all describe the same feeling. Not fear, not confusion, but certainty. Like, for just a moment, they saw behind the curtain. Now let's shift gears for a second, because I want you to imagine something. You're playing a game, fully immersed. You forget it's a game. Hours pass, days even. Then suddenly, you remember. This isn't real. What happens next? Do you keep playing? Do you start testing the boundaries? Do you take risks you never would have before? Now flip that. What if that's happening right now? What if some people have already realized this? What if they've figured out how to bend the rules? It sounds like a conspiracy, but there are theories that certain individuals throughout history somehow understood something deeper about reality. People who seemed ahead of their time, who described the world in ways that didn't make sense until much later. Were they just geniuses, or did they see something the rest of us couldn't? Now here's the part where things get heavy. Because if this is a simulation, then whoever created it has control, total control. They can observe everything, every thought, every action, every choice. Nothing is hidden. And if that's true, then privacy doesn't exist. Free will might not exist either. Every decision you've ever made could have been predicted, or even predetermined. Now take a breath, because I know this can spiral fast. So let's ground it for a second. Even if this is a simulation, your experiences still feel real. Your choices still matter to you. Your life still has meaning. But it does raise a question. If reality is constructed, then what is truth? Is truth what we perceive, or what exists beyond perception? And if we can't access anything beyond this system, does it even matter? Now here's one last thought, and it might be the strangest one of all. What if the simulation isn't about us? What if we're not the main characters? What if we're just background processes, part of something much bigger, something we can't even comprehend? Maybe the simulation isn't being run for humans at all. Maybe we're just a byproduct, a side effect, like code running in the background of a much larger program. And we'll never understand its true purpose, because we're not supposed to. So now we're left with this, a possibility, not proven, not disproven, just there, lurking in the background of everything. And the more you think about it, the harder it is to ignore, because every answer just leads to more questions. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the simulation isn't something to escape. Maybe it's something to explore. Or maybe it's something we were never meant to question at all. So I'll leave you with this. If reality is just a system, and you're aware of it, does that make you more free, or less? And if there is something outside this world, watching, waiting, would you even recognize it? Or would it look exactly like everything else you already see? Let me know what you think. And before you go, take a second. Look around. Really look. Ask yourself, is this real? Or is it just really convincing?